and welcome to the channel. My name is The Steak Bake, and today we're going to be discussing our 24-25 Premier League predictions for the new season, which starts today or maybe yesterday, depending when this video comes out. Let's get into the video. Hope you enjoy it. So this is our Premier League table next to us from 20th all the way to 1st. We're going to start on the bottom and go through every single team, giving a very brief discussion on why we think the team are going to finish where they're going to finish. There'll certainly be some weird controversial ones, and there'll be some ones that certainly aren't particularly controversial this season as well. Hopefully I don't go too far wayward that you think I'm an absolute psychopath, but hopefully also I've picked a few things that are a little bit interesting and I'm not just going super safe for the whole thing. So let's get in with 20th place. And to the surprise of absolutely zero people, I am wearing a Portsmouth shirt, which means that my 20th place team will be Southampton. And to be honest, I'm doing this not from a biased position. Well, I am, but I'm trying to be unbiased when going through these predictions as much as possible. Southampton have made actually a decent chunk of signings. I just don't think they're the kind of players that will keep you in the Premier League this season. There's a lot of players that I would describe as good championship players, really good championship players in some cases. The problem with Southampton is they have lost quite a few important players, or players that I would consider to be important to them in previous seasons. Stuart Armstrong, for example, has left the club, as has Shea Adams, both very important to the team previously. And although they have brought in players from around Europe to replace them, I'm not sure they're the kind of players that you could earmark and say definitely 100% that is a good replacement who's going to fill in those goals and assists from those two players and a couple of other players who have left as well. Harwood Bellis from Manchester City is a good signing. They had him last season. They've brought him in permanently for just over £20 million. And Flynn Downs has also joined for just under £20 million, which seemed like good business for either now or the future. There's a couple of players in there from Aston Villa as well. Archer, who signed earlier today. Very good signing as well. But again, I just think these are quality players in the Championship at the moment. Yes, they are all quite young and therefore might develop into Premier League players in the future. But at the moment, in order to stay in the Premier League this season, I think it's going to be really difficult for them. One thing Southampton do have for them is they did lose a load of players on loan while they dropped down into the Championship. And a few of those have come back and are perhaps going to play within the team. But they sent them down last time. Are they going to stay in the division with those players? I don't know. I'm going to go a little bit biased here and say that I would rather they didn't stay in the Premier League, although I don't particularly want them in the Championship either. One particular signing who I do think is like prime Championship level is Ben Brereton Diaz. Never really proved himself higher than the Premier League. He's gone out to various leagues around Europe and done okay. Premier League, I don't think it's there for him. I think he's a fantastic Championship striker. I really do. And if they do go down, they'll probably go straight back up again, probably walk in the league. But Southampton are my 20th place, to no one's surprise. Controversially, in 19th place, I have gone for Nottingham Forest, which means that at least one of the promoted teams will stay up in my predictions. However, let's talk about Nottingham Forest first. I just think they've spent too much money on a couple of players who aren't really going to massively improve their team. Elliot Anderson from Newcastle United has certainly shown flares of being a very good player for Newcastle. However, £41 million is a lot of money for a player who hasn't really established themselves as a Premier League player just yet. I'm sure he will be good. I'm sure he'll be fantastic. I just feel like £40 million is a massive overpayment for him. But I feel like this is just like a big fee for someone who hasn't really proved that they're due that fee yet. They have brought in Nikola Milenkovic from Fiorentina, left-sided centre-back to replace Niakate, who's gone out the door this summer. Certainly a loss to Nottingham Forest. However, I think Milenkovic is a very good signing and certainly has proved himself in the Italian division as a very good defensive player. However, I just don't think it's going to be enough for Nottingham Forest this season. They struggled a lot at the end of last season. They struggled to score goals. They struggled to get results. They just about stayed in the division over teams like Luton. And I think if you're down mixing with that kind of lot, you need to really pull out the stops with your signings. And I don't think these signings have been good enough for me to say you're definitely staying up. And as a result, I'm going to put Nottingham Forest in 19th place. In 18th place, we have Leicester City, another one of the newly promoted sides. Did really well in the Championship last season under Maresca. However, Maresca, the manager, is out of the door, as is Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, both of them heading to Chelsea. I think those are really big losses for Leicester. I think having that control of midfield with easily the best player in the division last year in Dewsbury-Hall, and then losing a manager who had got you playing a certain way is a very difficult thing to replace. And I think Leicester will really struggle in the Premier League this season, considering they haven't really replaced them with like-for-like kind of players. Certainly not Dewsbury-Hall. They've not really replaced him with anyone so far. Sure, they've brought in Michael Golding from Chelsea's under-21s, but he's certainly not a player that I think is going to live up to the same hype as Dewsbury-Hall. Fatawu is a good signing, however, did really well on the wing for them last season on loan from Portugal, but he has signed permanently. I think that's a really good deal. I want to see more from Leicester in the transfer window. I don't think I've seen enough yet to predict them to stay up. Clearly, it's going to be a difficult year. I'm going to have them relegated, but there's a number of teams in the next couple of spots that I think could also be in trouble. Leicester are the ones I'm going for now, but that could easily change with some managerial switches, I'm sure. But right now, Leicester, 18th place. 17th, and it is the final of the promoted side. Ipswich Town, I believe, are going to stay in the division, and it certainly isn't because Connor Chaplin plays for them, and he came through our youth system as a Portsmouth born and bred. Come on, Connor, you can do it in the Prem, I believe. Straight on to the point, though, Ipswich Town will certainly have a difficult season for them. However, I certainly think they have recruited much better than their other promotion counterparts. Amari Hutchinson signing fully from Chelsea is a really good signing for them, as he was one of their best players last season. They've held on to most of their squad, which is really, really good. They've also brought in Delap from Manchester City, who has long been touted a future striker, a future Premier League striker. I think he'll hit the ground running. And then today, they've brought in Sammy Smodics, the top goal scorer from the Championship last season. So he knows where the goal is, and that's one of the hardest things about being promoted to the Premier League, is keeping that goal scoring going. From obviously a very good season in the Championship, I certainly think Ipswich can do it. One of the hugest things about Ipswich as well is they have kept their manager despite interest from Chelsea and Manchester United. Kieran McKenna is absolutely vital to the way that Ipswich play and set up, and he is an absolutely fantastic manager that I think can just about keep them in this league. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be a tough season for Ipswich fans, but I think they would bite my hand off for 17th place. But I believe you can do it, certainly with McKenna at the wheel. Come on, Ipswich, I hope you stay up as well, because you've got a number of ex-Pompey players, and I do have a soft spot for Connor Chaplin and Marcus Harness and various other players that you've got as well. 16th now, and I've gone for a slightly controversial one because I think a lot of people will think that Fulham will be fairly safe this season, but I actually think it's going to be a really difficult year for them. And the main reason for this is I don't see who is going to score their goals. Sure, they have Raul Jimenez, who previously, in a previous life, it almost seems like now, has been a prolific Premier League striker, but ever since that head injury, he's never looked like the same player. He's never hit the ground running, and I don't think he's looked like summoning that player from the depths whilst playing for Fulham. Of course, they don't have Mitrovic anymore. I think they're really going to struggle for goals this season. One player I do think is a really good signing is Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal for a relatively low fee, around the 30 million mark as well. I think that's a good deal for someone with established Premier League experience. The injury risk is probably one of the reasons why it's a slightly lower fee than you've seen for some of the other players around his age during this window, certainly Englishmen. I think it's a great signing, though. I think he can hit the ground running. The loss of De Cordova-Reid, he has been instantly replaced with a player that I think is better. They've potentially got something. They just need someone through the middle to score the goals. In my eyes, I see 19th, 20th as lagging behind, and then kind of 15th to 18th, you'll see who 15th is in a minute, will battle it out for that remaining relegation spot, or to avoid that remaining relegation spot, I should say. 15th place, I'm going to put Brentford in this position, and I think that they are going to lose Ivan Toney, and that could be a real issue for them. They have struggled with goals with him out of the side in his extended betting scandal period last season, although Mbeumo did put some balls in the back of the net, and Visser as well. those two players are still there. So at the moment, as it stands, they can put the ball in the back of the net, which is more than can be said for most of the other teams that I've predicted to be in this relegation battle. I think Brentford will probably score more goals than most of these other teams, and they do have a very good manager in Thomas Frank, which I think might be enough to keep you in the league this season. I do think, however, it's another relegation fight for Brentford this year. They have made some really nice signings so far, just a couple of them. They've signed Thiago from Club Bruges. I can't pretend to know too much about him, but £33 million would suggest that he is someone that is well touted in the Belgium league, and certainly someone that we should keep our eyes on this season as a potential replacement for Ivan Toney up top. They've also signed Fabio Carvalho from Liverpool, a player that Liverpool certainly thought would do a lot better and develop very well. He hasn't quite done it at Liverpool, but he then did go out on loan last season to the Championship and played decently well at Hull City in the second half of the season. The £23.5 million deal is about £8 or £9 million more than Southampton were willing to pay for him. So that kind of shows Brentford's intention that they're willing to overspend compared to a rival for a player, which is good to see, because that means you've got ambitions to stay in the division, that's for sure. And they've also got Thomas Frank as manager, and I think that might be enough to keep you in the league this season. I think that's the kind of top end of teams that are going to be in the relegation fight. The teams that I'm going to say above them now are probably just safe. It's that Brentford, Fulham, Ipswich, Leicester that I think is going to be a real battle for that final relegation place. I think Nottingham Forest and Southampton are fully down this season, unfortunately. 14th place, I have gone for Bournemouth, and I think they had a really good season at the end of last year and looks like the kind of side that might be pushing towards those European places towards the end of that season and towards the start of this season. However, they've lost Dominic Solanke, their main goal scorer. He scored more than half of their goals last season, and taking that kind of thing out of the team is a detriment to the side, that is for sure. They have now replaced him with Porto's Eva Nielsen. Anyone who plays Football Manager will be very familiar with him, particularly my good friend Salty B. He's certainly someone that can put the ball in the back of the net and is a very good striker. However, is he going to put the ball in the back of the net as many times as Dominic Solanke? I don't think he is. And I think as a result, Bournemouth will just teeter away from pushing towards Europe and end up in that mid-pack, mid-table mediocrity. And I think they'll be pretty happy with that this season. I think certainly they'll flirt with the top half a little bit and then maybe teeter off towards the final part of the season. A bit of flair, a bit of excitement from Bournemouth this season, and I think they'll find themselves relatively safe in the mid-table. I think that'll be fine for them. And certainly if they flirt with the top half, that wouldn't be a surprise. If they end up finishing 10th or 11th, I would not be surprised at all. But for now, I'm going to predict them to finish a little bit lower because of the loss of Dominic Solanke. But that's really it, really. Now, next up in 13th place is Gary O'Neill's Wolverhampton Wanderers. And I think this is a position that they will be relatively happy with. They have lost Pedro Neto to Chelsea, but they got an extraordinary high fee for him and have ended up making quite a lot of money off of him and their transfers throughout this window. They've got a bit of money spare, and they've brought in a couple of players that certainly look like they could replace them in the long run. But the reason why I have Wolves finishing where they are is because there are a few players returning from loan that might establish themselves more in the Wolves team this season. I'm thinking Podence, I'm thinking Guedes, both coming back to Wolves this season. Perhaps they can make an impact. Of course, Wolves could decide that they don't want them anymore and immediately eject them out the door. Completely fair. If they do that, then perhaps they might end up a little bit further down the league. But they've brought in some good players so far. They've got a little bit of money to spend. They've got a good manager who's playing some decent football. I think Wolves will be pretty safe. Premier League safety, I don't think they'll be involved in a relegation battle. Good season from Wolves. 12th place, and I have gone for Everton, and I think they would have finished in about this position last season if it hadn't been for points deductions. They certainly had a relatively good year for Everton. Sean Dyche's side played some decent football, scored some good goals, kept some good clean sheets, battled really hard and worked their socks off in order to get a good finish away from the relegation zone last season. And I think they'll be pretty clear of it this year. They've lost Onana, but commanded a decent fee of around about £50 million. And I think it's a good deal on both sides. Everton get a good wodge of cash, and a good player has gone through the door of another club within the division. And Dye and O'Brien both signed from the French league. I think you'll see quite a lot of players signed from the French league this season, mostly because they haven't got their TV deal done yet, but they basically haven't got an international TV deal, so you can't watch Ligue 1 from any other country in the world right now, which is madness. And as a result, a lot of the clubs will be looking to sell their players because they haven't got that guaranteed income from the TV deal. So you'll see quite a lot of loans with options to buy as a way of getting players in, and then the French teams will be ejecting players out as fast as they possibly can. So you might see some decent deals coming in, and I think Everton have capitalised on a couple of those with the centre-half O'Brien and also Dye from Marseille. Good signings, certainly ones that will improve the team and make Everton look like a club with a bit more depth, because that's what they kind of lacked last season. They didn't really have the depth to kind of challenge further up the league. It made it look a bit more like a struggle, when I actually think they weren't really in danger of being relegated, apart from when there were loads of points deducted. If they hold on to Dominic Calvert-Lewin as well, there's someone that can score some goals to compete with the players that they've brought in. I think is a really good team. They've kept Jared Branthwaite as well, really important for them this season. Fantastic centre-half. I think they've brought in a couple of players to kind of cover that position just in case. However, Branthwaite remains there for now, and if he does go, another big high fee will go to Everton, which will help them replace him as well. So, good business so far from Everton. They're a good team. They've got a good manager. Mid-table, good season. 11th place, and I've gone for Brighton and Hove Albion. Potentially a position that they'll be a little bit disappointed with, but I think this is a really competitive league this year, and 11th place is by no means not breathing down the neck of the European places. I think they'll certainly be breathing down the neck. However, I don't think they will get it, and I think they'll fall away, and I think there'll be a couple of clubs that do just that. Brighton are one of those teams that are in that kind of pack that want to break into the Big Six, but haven't really done it yet. They've signed a couple of interesting players. Mintet from Newcastle for £30 million. They've also signed Gruder from Mainz for around the same price, and also Vijver, a holding midfielder from the Dutch league as well, again for around about the £30 million mark. Some decent signings with decent splodges of cash being spent. They've spent over £100 million already on players so far this season. Are they players that can make the step up? Maybe. I don't know yet. I don't know enough about these players to definitely say that they're going to challenge for Europe this season. So I'm going to put them in that chasing pack, 9th, 10th, 11th. I think I've been a little bit harsh to them here, but I like what they're doing. I like what they're planning. At the moment, it's going to be 11th. Brighton fans might be disappointed with 11th place, but they're going to be even more disappointed with my prediction for 10th, because it's Crystal Palace. Sorry, Brighton. I'm sorry. I've put your rivals one place above you this season. And the reason for that is because of their fantastic end to last year. Palace have looked the real business under their new manager. And I certainly think if they can continue to do that, they will be another team just trying to make it to Europe next season, a scrape in to that 8th place position. The reason I think they're going to fall short, however, is they have lost Michael Elise. He has headed to Bayern Munich for a club record £60 million, £53 million. £53 million is a really good deal for Elise. I think that's a good splodge of money. They can certainly spend it to replace him, and they have attempted to. They've brought in Ismaila Sarr from Marseille, another one of those French league slightly cheaper players. Sarr is a player who's played in the Premier League. He's played with Watford there before and looked probably their best player. So to have him back in the Premier League is a good point. And I think Palace have done what they could to replace Michael Elise. I still think they could do with a couple more players. And there is a little bit of a risk that they could lose Mark Guehi. And after his Euro performance, that would be a real pain for Crystal Palace. Now that he's back from injury, he's going to be their vital man. I imagine he'll be like captain. He'll be certainly one of their most important players. If they lose him, that would be disastrous for them right now. And I hope that they don't. And I hope that Crystal Palace continue their surge up the table. And 10th place is where I think they're going to finish. But I wouldn't be surprised if around about Christmas time you see them in 7th or 8th. The controversy continues in 9th place. I've gone for Manchester United, and I can already hear the comments destroying me. I can already hear it. There is a reason for this. There is a reason. I promise you it's not a slight on Manchester United. I don't think this is Man United doing badly. I think it is other teams doing better this season. And ultimately, the block from 7th to 11th is going to be really tight. I think it's going to be a really tight fight for that 7th and 8th European position. And I just think Man United are going to fall short because of perhaps injuries. I mean, Yoro is already injured, their prize centre-back who was in to replace the signing of Branthwaite, which never went through. I just think Man United are one of those teams that could fall away. Certainly, if they keep Erik Ten Hag. I don't really rate Ten Hag. I never have done. I've never thought he has the right style. In fact, last season, I didn't see a style from him. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that I don't think Man United had much of a plan last season, except in that game, the FA Cup final against Manchester City, where they suddenly had a plan and they executed it perfectly and they looked like a good side. If Man United can do that consistently every single game this season, then they're going to finish in the top 4, I imagine. They played really, really well. They kept out one of the best sides in the league and they look like scoring goals as well. So if Man United can do that all season, fantastic. The problem is I don't think they can. I still think there's too many divas in that dressing room. I still think there's too many players who have had good careers previously that are now at the end of their career. I'm looking at Christian Eriksen. I'm looking at Casemiro. I'm hearing Christian Eriksen's about to leave, but I'll include him in this spate for now because I can only go by the players that they have in currently. I think there's just too many players who are a little bit like the dregs of that Man United era where they had lost the dressing room all the time. There's still a couple of those players there. I think Rashford sometimes completes that dressing room with that kind of thing, the little diva-esque attitude, and certainly Bruno Fernandes is the biggest diva in the entire Premier League. I just think there's too much personality in that dressing room to really push it further. I think you need a team. I still don't think they have that. I think this Man United side is good, and I think it is better than last year, and I think you will see a Man United that look improved compared to last year. They might even beat their points total of last season in this position. I just don't think that they are going to be good enough to get into the European places. And I know there's going to be so many people screaming at me. Hold your screams until we get to Christmas, until you've established yourself as a European place, and then I will bow my hat to you and I will say I'm sorry. Man United, I should have predicted it all along. What I will say is last season I predicted them to finish 4th. You didn't do it. So I've had faith in you before. This season, I've lost the faith. By all means, prove me wrong and come back next season as a much stronger team. I'm just going to predict Man United in 9th, and I'm going to go now. I'm running. Bye. 8th place and taking up the Europa Conference League position is going to be West Ham United for this position. I think West Ham are going to get it, and the reason I think they're going to get it is because I think they've had a fantastic window. They finally bought a striker who can put the ball in the back of the net in probably any league in Europe. I think Füllkrug is a really good signing. He's kind of that build of striker that West Ham haven't really gone for in the past, in that he is a powerhouse going forward, but can also control the ball, play the ball. He's a really good player, and he has an absolutely fearsome bolt of a shot. Like, one of the hardest kickers in the Premier League, I reckon, this season. Sometimes he just absolutely smacks it into the top bins. Seen him play a lot for Dortmund. He doesn't get loads and loads of goals, but he gets involved. He moves the play forward. He certainly creates things as well as scores goals. He was really good for Germany in the Euros as well in his brief moments that he got onto the field. I think it's a really good signing, and I think it's the type of signing that takes West Ham to the next level. They've been too long stuck with Michael Antonio up front. He's not going to be that man anymore. They've gone with Füllkrug. I think he can do it. They paid quite a lot of money for Max Kilman from Wolves, an English centre-back who potentially could do a job, but I think they've paid quite a lot of money for him, over £40 million. Potentially a little bit of a waste of money. However, he's a really good centre-back, established Premier League centre-back, 27 years old, in the prime of his life, prime of his career. I think is a decent signing at the end of the day, even if they have overpaid a little bit. But the main signing for West Ham is Crescencio Somerville from Leeds United, one of the best players in the Championship last season, breaking through at Leeds, done really, really well, been called up to the most recent Dutch international side. He's a really, really good footballer, and everyone knows that he is now. Like, he's a bit of a household name when it comes to the Championship, and I'm sure he will be in the Premier League soon as well under West Ham. I think he can create a lot of goals. He scores some nice goals as well, and I think he will be supplying the goals for Fulkrug, and I think that means that West Ham have had a really good summer, potentially one of the best summers in the league, I think, from a on paper perspective. I think West Ham are set for that final European place, and I even think they're going to be one of the teams that potentially tries to Aston Villa it and get up towards those higher European places. Ultimately, I think they'll fall short. I think that block is squeezed up a little bit more, but it's fallen away from the first and second a little bit. We'll get to that when we come to it, but that's why I think the West Ham have finished where they are. I wouldn't be surprised to see them finish higher, but I don't think they'll finish any lower than 8th. 7th place, biggest spenders, ridiculously sized squad. It's Chelsea for this season, and I think they had a really good end to last season, which made them start to look like the type of team we used to see at Stamford Bridge over the last 20 years or so. However, I don't think it's going to be an improvement on last year's position of 6th. I think that was a real jump for them after having a really poor start to the season. And I think that this year, with the league cramped up a little bit more, as I say, I think it'll be a real challenge for them to finish in the Champions League. And I don't think they're going to do it. And I think they'll struggle to finish in the clear European places for Europa League. I think they'll require the coefficient to get it. The fact that they have a squad of 54, 56 first team senior professionals right now is ridiculous. And I certainly imagine a lot of those will go out on loan. However, a lot of them are going to stay, and I think that's going to create a really weird thing with the dressing rooms, certainly at the start. Like, any of the new players are going to come in and just be like, nobody knows who I am. Nobody's spoken to me yet, because they're all trying to introduce themselves to all the other players. And some people think I'm being a little bit petty over the fact that they've signed so many players, but there is going to be a problem. There is not going to be enough coat pegs for everyone to have their shirt hung up before training. There is going to be not enough positions for people to shower at the same time and things like that. It's going to be a challenge for Chelsea this season, both logistically and also morally, like how to keep their morale in the level that they need to be in order to compete in this league. I think Maresca, the new manager, has got it really cut out for him. And I think part of it is his problem, because part of it is him saying, I don't want this player in anymore. I don't want this player in anymore. And I don't want this player anymore. Go and sell them because I don't want them. Hearing that Malang Sarr's has his contract terminated. We're hearing that Trevor Chalobah is training with the under-21s and banned from the first team's building. It's that kind of thing coming in as a new manager that could go either way. You could either create a kind of ruthless dressing room where everyone champions themselves together and works together in order to make the team succeed, or you can have a bunch of very angry players who aren't getting enough game time that don't like the manager. And I think it could go either way. And if I potentially saw any team from the top 11 falling into the bottom half because of a bit of a disaster season, I think it's Chelsea. I think Chelsea could have a disaster season. I'm going to go on the side of caution and say at the moment, I think they've signed some decent players. Dewsbury Hall is a good signing. A couple of the youngsters that we've seen coming in from Brazil are exciting signings, that's for sure. Pedro Neto from Wolves is a hell of a lot of money, but he's a really good player, provided he can stay fit. So there are players in there that excite me to watch Chelsea this season. Cole Palmer was one of the best players in the league last season, and Jackson actually kind of did pretty well, despite the fact him looking like one of the worst, best strikers I've ever seen. If you've ever watched him play, you'll know what I mean by that. He kind of stumbles his way into a hat-trick. It's a very weird thing for Nicholas Jackson. I don't think he's really aware of how good he's playing or how bad he's playing. He just kind of falls forward and ends up putting the ball in the back of the net quite a lot, or makes a run and turns out he's one-on-one, and then he'll miss, and then the next time he'll score from 25 yards. He's a very strange player, Nicholas Jackson. I don't think I've ever seen a player be so unpredictably rubbish and then so predictably fantastic 2 seconds later. Very odd player. I'm going to go with 7th. I think you'll see people predicting them 9th or 10th this season, and I think you'll see a few ambitious people predicting them 5th or 6th. But I think 7th is very fair for Chelsea this season. I don't think Chelsea fans will be too upset about it either. Into the big boy positions then, and 6th place I've gone with Aston Villa. Fantastic team, fantastic manager in Unai Emery, just an absolute success merchant when it comes to his most recent teams. Aston Villa did really, really well last year, played some fantastic football. 6th place I think is back a little bit, but let's not forget that they do have to compete on multiple levels this year, and I'm sure they'll want to give a good account of themselves in the Champions League. So I think there'll be a few games that Aston Villa slip up on this season compared to last year. However, I still think they're a quality outfit. They really are, and they've made some really good signings as well. They have spent quite a bit of money, though, for those signings. £50 million for Onana in particular seems like a lot of money, but he is a player that they needed because they lost Douglas Luiz. So they've replaced him with Onana and then brought in another player as well. So they have brought in rotationary options, which is something you need to do if you want to compete in the Champions League. You have to build your squad out, have to have quality in depth, and that's certainly something that they're looking for this season. I think Martson is a fantastic signing at left back, relatively cheap considering he was playing for the team that got to the Champions League final this season, although he did make the mistake in the final that lost them it, really, to be honest. But I think he's a fantastic signing for Aston Villa, and he will hit the ground running. It's a shame that Diaby has gone out to the Saudi League. However, they got a big chunk of wodge of cash for him, so I don't think they'll be too disappointed because £65 million is a lot of money. Obviously, they've lost Diaby, but they have replaced him with 3 different young players. We've got Dobbin from Everton, we've got Illing from Juventus, and we've also got Philogene from Hull in the Championship. So a variety of players that could fill that role, potentially give them more depth on the wings and through the middle. I think Aston Villa have a really good year, I really do. I think 6th place is something that they'll be pretty happy with, especially if they also do reasonably well in the Champions League, pick up a couple of wins in the new group stage format. I think they certainly can do well in Europe as well, but 6th place in the Premier League gets them into the Europa League next season, and I think they'll be pretty happy about it. Now, occupying my final Champions League position, and perhaps another one that people will think is pretty controversial, it is Liverpool. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Losing Klopp is not going to be an easy thing for Liverpool to go through. I think they've actually appointed a really good manager to replace him in Arne Slot. He's that kind of very, very Klopp-esque, before he signed for Liverpool, kind of mould of manager in his style of play and the relative teams that he has coached and his age as well. Like he's that kind of manager. He seems pretty jolly as well. Like we got Klopp at the start when he was manager. He's very happy, very smiley. It seems like we've got that with Arne Slot as well. There's some personality there, that's for sure. And I think he is the right person to hit the ground running with Liverpool this season. And I also think it was fantastic for Klopp to be singing his name during his goodbye to the Anfield crowd, because that really gets the crowd behind him, gives him the best chance at establishing himself, because he has been touted by Jurgen as this guy to take over. It didn't really work with Moyes at Man United when Alex Ferguson said, Moyes is the guy taking over from me. It didn't really work that way, but perhaps it can work at Liverpool. They've certainly got the players to do some fantastic things this season. However, they have made 0 signings so far in the transfer window, and they've lost a couple of players as well. So it's a tough one for Liverpool, I think, this season. They're not really building a new team, but they are using their current team to fit into Arne Slot's new style, and it will be a slight change of style, even if it's mostly in that Jurgen Klopp mould. It will be a slight change of style, and it will take time for them to establish themselves in that style of play. I think it'll be difficult, I think it'll be challenging, but I still think Liverpool will get Champions League this season. Crucially, I think 5th place will be a Champions League position for Liverpool this season. And again, I'm seeing the Aston Villa, Liverpool and the teams that I've predicted in 4th and 3rd all being pretty interchangeable, but I think because of the new manager and the lack of signings, I have to drag Liverpool down a little bit. Let's see where it goes. For now, I'm saying 5th, but I'm down to be proved wrong for sure. 4th place, and perhaps very controversially, is Newcastle United. Now, there is a number of reasons for this, but none more than the fact that they do not have Europe this season. I think Newcastle have a really, really good team, and their style of football really works when they don't have those distractions of trophies elsewhere. If they can put all of that hard work and energy into the Premier League this season, Newcastle can finish in the top 4. As it stands as well, with Lee Carsley appointed, the England manager Eddie Howe is staying for the foreseeable future at Newcastle. And although I still think they need a couple of signings, they've not really lost anyone significant, and they already had a very good team. I think bringing in Lewis Hall from Chelsea, who was a loan last season, who they brought in full-time, is a good signing. I think they perhaps paid a little bit too much for him considering his age, but English tax and Premier League experience from Chelsea does mean that you would end up overpaying for that kind of player. I think he will be vital, certainly on that left side, which we've seen Dan Burn occupy quite a lot. They will also have Botman back. They will also have Shah. They've also got Joel Linton back, Bruno Guimaraes back. There's a lot of players who were out injured in various points last season, and it was a big loss to them. They had a huge injury crisis and still had a really good season. I think Newcastle can be the Aston Villa of last year. The team that doesn't have any European distractions. They bolt through, get up into those top 4 positions, and just never really get caught by the teams chasing them down. Potentially, they might even be in third for a lot of the season and then just drop down towards the end. But I think Newcastle are going to be one of those teams leading the charge for Champions League football this season. But Newcastle finishing in 4th, and again, pretty interchangeably with 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th here. I certainly think that's the kind of Champions League chasing pack. I think Newcastle will be pretty much spearheading it for most of the season, though, perhaps faltering near the end. Let's move on to talk about the trophyless Tottenham Hotspur, who will finish 3rd place this season. I actually think Spurs have had one of the better windows in the division. Them or West Ham, potentially, for the best windows. To be fair, Man United have signed a couple of good players as well, and I do think Man United will improve, as I said. However, their league position won't. Tottenham's league position, however, will improve. I think they'll move up to 3rd position, and I think part of that is due to signing a striker that can actually put the ball in the back of the net. Dominic Solanke signing for Spurs is a big capture for them, and certainly the probably longish term solution to the loss of Harry Kane last season. They didn't really replace him last year. They decided to go with Heung-min Son and Richarlison to replace him. It didn't really work out, and as a result, Tottenham finished a little bit lower than they perhaps would have liked. However, with Dominic Solanke, a guaranteed 20-goal-a-season striker at the front of their team, I think they can focus a lot more on scoring goals this season, and I think he's the type of player that Ange Postecoglou will get the most out of. One of the things that I was pretty interested to see was how Harry Kane would do under Ange. It ended up him leaving and it not happening anyway, because I didn't think Harry Kane was the type of player that would thrive in that really, really high press that they play, where they practically play with your entire team in your half, regardless of who they're playing. That really, like, on the halfway line stood entire defence and midfield forward to catch you offside. That really high press is just ridiculous from Postecoglou. And I think having a player who's a bit more of a target and a little bit less of someone who's going to drop deep in Dominic Solanke is a really good thing. I do think they have massively overpaid for him. I think £40 million would have been more than enough for a striker like him. However, he really is a guaranteed 15 to 20 goal a season striker. So can you really argue about that at the end of the day? If he gets 21 goals this season, are you really going to sit there and be like, yeah, we paid 65 million for him though, what a waste of money? You're not. You're going to say it's a good sign-in, and I think it will be at the end of the year. I certainly think he will be able to play in and utilise Heung-min Son and Kulusevski off of the wings a little bit more, and they've brought in a couple of really good youngsters as well. Archie Gray in particular from Leeds is a fantastic signing. I think he will be in the England setup before the end of the season. Certainly now that Lee Carsley is in charge, he's managed him in the under-21s a few times. And I just think Spurs have had a fantastic window. They've bought the type of players that I think Ange will enjoy in his system. I think Tottenham will thrive more than the others this season because of the players that they have bought in. I think they had the best window, and therefore I have to predict them the best of that little block of 4. We move on to the top 2 then, and who will it be this season? For the last 2 seasons, it has been Arsenal and Manchester City fighting it out for the champions position, and Man City have come up trumps in both of those seasons so far, albeit fairly close, with Arsenal. I think there will be a bit of a gap this year. I think Arsenal and City are pretty far ahead of the rest of the chasing pack at the moment, and I think they will continue to be so. Both have made a couple of signings which will improve their sides. I think that it is going to be Man City that win the league, unfortunately. Arsenal to take second place. Let's talk about Arsenal first before I go on to talk about why I think Man City will be the champions yet again. Arsenal have had a relatively quiet transfer window so far. They've brought in Raya, who was on loan last season on a permanent deal for just over £30 million. Played fantastically for them last year. No reason why you wouldn't make that loan to buy signing permanent. And they've also brought in Calafiori from Serie A, who was one of the standout players for Italy in the Euros. Really, really good central defender / wing-back. He can play both all along the back line. I think Arsenal could do with 1 or 2 more signings before the end of the window. Perhaps they could still do with Ivan Toney from Brentford or a similar striker. Some people are saying that it'll be Victor Osimhen. He's certainly someone that's looking to move on from his club and is a European leading goal scorer kind of striker. So I'd like to see him move to the Premier League. And if he chooses Arsenal, it's a fantastic deal for Arsenal. If that deal does go through, that might edge them a little bit closer to first place, in my opinion. But it's a fantastic Arsenal side, and it really is a good team. And with Arteta still at the helm, pulling all sorts of crazy things in pre-season, where he's stolen from his teammates and pickpocketed them in order to prove that they need to stay vigilant. Maybe they'll stay vigilant right until the end of the season, because that has seemed to be where they've lost it so far in the last couple of seasons. They've been right up there in first place or close to first place, and they've just faded away when it really mattered. So maybe Arteta's antics will teach them that they need to stay vigilant for the whole season. Who knows? I think it's a bit of madness, to be honest, rather than genius, but we shall see. What I do like about Arsenal is they've not really lost anyone. They've not really sold anyone. Certainly not players that we would consider first teamers, and I think they will compete on multiple levels this season. I think they'll send City all the way yet again. I think it'll be another really tight 1-2, perhaps decided on the last day of the season or a couple of days before the end of the season. Perhaps it might even be an Arsenal win. Who knows? I'm going to say Arsenal in second for now. Certainly, I think they are the kind of team that could push City all the way and will continue to do so for the next couple of seasons. But let's talk about Man City and why I think they're going to be Premier League champions. So why have I picked Manchester City in first place? And it's because I'm boring and I've just picked the safe option. There we go. End of predictions. So thank you for watching. No, I'm joking. The reason why I have picked Manchester City to finish at the top of the division yet again this season is because I think this is Pep Guardiola's final season in charge of Manchester City. My prediction relies on Pep Guardiola leaving Man City at the end of the season. I think he will tell the players that it's his last season, and I think they will play their absolute butts off for him for the whole of this season. What you've seen Man City do in the past is have a potentially slow start to the season, perhaps not the Man City that we'd expect. Few players come back from injury around the January mark, and suddenly they don't lose a game until the end of the season. And we did see that mostly in the league for Man City last year. However, in the Cups, in the Champions League, and in the FA Cup, you have to say they kind of failed a bit last season. They looked like they were going to go far in the Champions League. They didn't do so. They looked like they were going to win the FA Cup. Man United stopped them from doing so. And as a result, I think Man City will be disappointed with that season last year. I think they'll look at the Premier League and think, oh, well, we win the Premier League every year. We want to win the Champions League again. And they didn't win it. And then they got that further kick in the teeth of losing to their rivals in the final of the FA Cup. So I think you'll see a Manchester City come back with a vengeance this year. Julian Alvarez is the only one that you would earmark as a player who is a big loss. And I do think that is a big loss. £75 million is a lot of money, though. You couldn't really turn that down for someone that potentially is being kept out of the team by Haaland. Having said that, I think he played the most out of any player under Pep Guardiola last year. And I think he's fantastic. I think he's a fantastic footballer, and he's a huge loss. He's literally won everything with Man City in Argentina. He's a wonderful player. It's a shame to see him leave the league, but I get why you would if you're not being picked as striker, which is where he'd want to play. He's being utilised more along the wings of the central attacking midfield role. if you want to be a striker, then you probably have to leave when Haaland's in the team. Man City have signed Savinho from club relation Troyes, who are another team a part of the City group. Bit of a weird, controversial signing, in that he is Troyes' record signing, the most money they've ever paid for a player, since becoming in the City group as well. And then they immediately loaned him to Girona, where he did really, really well and scored lots of goals. And then he's never played for Troyes, and then Troyes have sold him to Man City. So, bit of a weird one. Bit of a illegal money spinning clever transfer deal, depending on which way you look at it. I think it's a bit wrong. I don't think you should be able to sell between your clubs in your group, really. I think that's a little bit of a conflict of interest, in my opinion. However, it's not up to me to decide the rules, and certainly if we start removing consortiums from owning various clubs, pretty much every club in the world, certainly the big clubs, will start to falter, and you'll see that a lot of people that own football clubs these days also own another one, or a baseball team or something along those lines. But it does look like a dodgy signing, and I do think it's a very dodgy signing for Manchester City. However, he's a good player and certainly can fill in that role of Julian Alvarez this season. I don't think he'll play as much as Julian Alvarez did, that's for sure. I think he'll play a little bit of a bit part. I think you'll see some of the younger Manchester City players breaking into the team a little bit more this year. I would have said that Oscar Bob would play a lot more, but I'm hearing that he has got quite a serious injury and will be missing most of the start of the season, if not most of the season, with that injury that he's got. I think that's right. Not great for Manchester City. Perhaps Savinho will play more than I expect, but I think Man City have relatively kept the core of their team the same. They've got world-class players in every single position. They've got world-class players on the bench. They're an absolute wonder team. Probably the best team ever assembled in the Premier League, certainly over a span of time. Like the past 4 or 5 years has just been this ridiculous Man City dominance, and that core team has stayed mostly the same. They don't do loads of transfers every single window, not anymore, now that they've built up that money. There is a slight issue here. I've predicted Man City to finish first, and the Mirror was reporting this morning, not that I read the Mirror, but I did see a tweet about it, that perhaps Manchester City would lose 70 to 80 points because of their 115 financial charges. I just don't see the Premier League putting that kind of punishment out, really. Potentially they could. Potentially Man City could just be relegated via points at the end of this season, in which case, fair enough, you know, you break the rules, you see the consequences. I don't think it's going to happen. I think if they do get a points deduction, it'll be minimal, to say the least. I think they're much more likely to get a couple of seasons transfer embargo, or something along those lines, and in which case that won't really affect Manchester City because they have such a good squad anyway. It will just age a little bit. Man City are just going to continue to do the same, and like I said, I do think this is Pep Guardiola's final season, and I think that's enough. That's enough to make a Man City super team push more than they've pushed before, and I think you'll see Man City and Arsenal run away with the league this year, and Man City come out on top, and I think you'll probably see a Man City get to the final of the Champions League and win at least one of the 2 domestic trophies as well. I would not be surprised, to say the least. They've already won the Community Shield, which, although it isn't a trophy, it's a glorified friendly, is a good earmark for the rest of the season. So Manchester City in first place, then that is going to be my league table. Let's visualize it in a way that shows the European places and the relegation places. So here is the final league table with their color-coded positions and trophies that they will be in the following season. We've got that Champions League group from 1st to 5th. I think England will potentially get the coefficient this year and therefore regain that 5th Champions League position, and therefore it will mean that 6th and 7th are the teams that go into the Europa League, and 8th place gets that Europa Conference League, provided that one of the top 8 wins the 2 cups. So that's how I think it's going to look. I think Man United will just miss out, and I think they'll have a better season. I think they'll look better, but I think they'll ultimately fall short, because I think that pack of Tottenham to West Ham will be a much closer pack this season. I think it will be a real competition for the European places this year, and then I think you start to fall away, and then you get that big bulky relegation fight from Brentford to Southampton. Could be any one of those 6 teams. I'm going with the 3 that I've chosen because of the reasons I stated earlier, and because I'm a Portsmouth fan and I want Southampton to go down. But, you know, I'm not biased, I promise. I'm joking. Of course, there's a little bit of bias in everything you do. If there wasn't, you wouldn't be a real football fan, would you? But I'm looking forward to this season's Premier League. I think last season was potentially quite a drab season. Certainly the quality of football was quite boring. Perhaps Pep Guardiola will spin something a little bit more interesting for his final season, and then everyone will copy him. Or perhaps Arne Slot, for example, will produce something that does really, really well, and everyone will copy him. Who knows? Maybe Ange Ball will work this season and Tottenham will win a trophy. You know what? As part of my predictions this year, I'm going to go mental. Are you ready? Are you ready for this, guys? Are you ready? Because this is not the kind of prediction that you're going to get on every channel. Tottenham Hotspur are going to win a trophy this season. It's either going to be the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup, but they're going to win one of them. I think the Carabao Cup is going to Spurs this season, and everyone will have to stop memeing them. And they won't stop memeing them because it's still one trophy in 20 years. So feel free to carry on memeing them. But I think Spurs are going to win a trophy this season. I think that I don't know where that's come from. I just thought of it and I thought, you know what? 2024, 2025 is the year that Spurs finally break the duck. Without Harry Kane, and Harry Kane will probably win absolutely nothing in Germany. It'll be very funny. But, you know, that's where I'm going to go. You know what? Let's say Tottenham are going to win the Carabao Cup and Manchester City will win the FA Cup. And then the Champions League is going to be Man City as well. So a Man City treble with a Tottenham Hotspur Carabao Cup. Who knows? Maybe that will happen. Probably not. It's predictions at the end of the day. There's still half a transfer window to go. All of these predictions could be thrown up in the air tomorrow, especially if this FFP goes through and loads of teams get deducted points and Man City get deducted 80 points. Who knows what's going to happen? The point is, nobody knows what's going to happen. But those are my predictions for the 2024-2025 season. Thank you very much for watching this very silly video. Let's be honest, prediction videos are silly in their core because nobody knows what's going to happen at the end of the day, but I hope you have enjoyed it nonetheless. Before you go down in the comments and give me likes and subscribes, which I want you to do, I need you to go down and click on a very special video. I'm going to put a card to it here, maybe, or just a link down below. It is a video by my good friend Y Callum, and he got to be a real-life football manager for a day. Genuinely, he plays Football Manager, and a lot of his content is based around FM. He does fantastic content around FM. You should go and watch that anyway. However, they has produced a video where he actually got to be a real-life football manager of a football club. Go and watch it. It's a fantastic day. I was gutted that I couldn't be there, but it's an amazing video, and you should go and watch it right now. Hopefully, there'll be a card or a pop-up or something down below. It will be the first thing in the description. If it is in the description, it'll be the first thing in the description. Go down there, click it right now, watch it right now, like it, subscribe, all of that good stuff. He's a wonderful human being, and he deserves every single follow and subscription that he gets, and 10 times more than that, because he's a wonderful bloke. And don't tell him I said that. Please don't tell him I said that. He'll get all fuzzy inside, and I can't be having that. He's already got enough fuzz on his head. But yeah, go and watch his video, really important. If you did enjoy this video, please go leave a like and a subscription on the video as well. I would much appreciate it. Hopefully we'll do some more content around football and around the Premier League this season. And maybe I'll do like a championship prediction as well. Who knows? I'm not going to promise anything because I never go through with all these promises. But subscribe anyway. I will see you in the next video. And remember, be kind to one another. See you later.